Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the GPP Chin Music Podcast. I am Big Italy 42, joined by Josh Shepherdson at BChad50 on Twitter. And we've got some GPP gold for you here. A lot of exciting things, as you know, Josh, the baseball guru of the world over here. So he's got some guys that were even off my radar after doing my research today, so I'm excited to get things kicked off. How about you, Josh?
I am too, and I think the most important thing to start with before we get into the players is the ridiculous forecast today.
Yeah.
There are 5 games with threats of rain and thunderstorms, one or the other, both in some instances, with greater than 50% chance of precipitation, which is scary. If you're setting lineups, you need to be ready. Those 5 games are the Blue Jays at Yankees, Mets at Nationals, Pirates at Reds, Red Sox at Phillies, and White Sox at Royals. Those are all none of those are domes. So if the weather's bad, there is that threat of a rainout. Anybody that played yesterday understands the threat of a rainout. Thanks, Cubs and Cardinals. But yeah, so keep tabs on those. Most of the plays are actually fading that action. You will see a couple players that we tout that are in those games, but we'll remind you when we get to them that you need to keep tabs on the weather.
Yeah, in Ohio especially, I can tell you with absolute certainty, if you could see outside my window right now, it's getting pretty crazy out there. Thunderstorms already here in Columbus, so about 100 miles away from Cincinnati. So I could tell you firsthand that it's not looking pretty here right now. So we still got 7 hours until first pitch, but definitely going to need to see some improvements before I'm going to be playing anyone in that one. All right, we're going to be talking FanDuel and DraftKings here. We're going to go first with starting pitchers. So I know you've got some guys on your list. Here's a guy that I know was not on your list I'm going to throw out there. And obviously we're talking GPPs here. Most of these guys not safe for your catch games. But in a GPP, I love to target the high strikeout guys. And there's not a ton of high strikeout guys on tap today. But one, Jake Odorizzi, 24.2% strikeout rate last season. Really struggles at keeping the ball on the ground. More of a fly ball pitcher, but elite. Well, I don't know about elite, but borderline elite strikeout upside. So what's your take on Jake Odorizzi tonight?
He's a good name to throw in there, especially for the GPPs. The fly ball issue shouldn't be as big of a deal pitching at home. Tropicana Field does reduce home run output, both to left-handed and right-handed batters, and it also reduces run scoring. So definitely an Odorizzi guy, not on my initial list, but definitely a guy that when I put together some lineups tonight, I do anticipate on sticking Odorizzi in a few GPPs. So I do like the play. Got to chase that strikeout upside, especially at DK, where you're going to get a little bit more point scoring with that. And the one benefit of the fly ball tendencies of Jake Odorizzi are that fly balls, besides infield fly balls, pop-ups, have the lowest batting average on balls in play. So these fly ball pitchers, if they're not hit out of the yard, yes, they do damage through ISO and slugging. You don't usually want to target a ton of fly ball pitchers, but they do have a lower batting average in general. So again, at a site like DraftKings, where you get penalized for hits allowed, the fact that those are going to result in more outs, you're going to get the strikeout upside. There is definitely some upside with Odorizzi tonight.
Yeah, he's at $7,400 on DraftKings, $78 on FanDuel. So who's somebody you got on your list here? I know you've got a few guys that you're looking at. Who's your options here?
My favorite pick is another guy with high strikeout upside. He's a guy that I would feel comfortable using in cash games and in GPPs, which is the focus of the pod. We'll go with Carlos Carrasco. I like him at both FanDuel and DK. Was brilliant last year after his sabbatical in the bullpen. He came back out firing bullets, high strikeout rate, great ground ball rate. As most listeners probably know, was just rewarded with a 4-year contract with the Indians. They believe in him. I believe in him. I love their pitching coach, Mickey Hallaway, has done great work with that staff, and Carlos Carrasco is a perfect example. And against that Houston Astros lineup, there is some danger of power, but there's a lot of swing and miss in that lineup, and I want a big piece of Carlos Carrasco tonight.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. He's my cash game and GPP pitcher. He'll probably be one of my most used players at any position tonight. I'm a big fan of his in that matchup.
I'm with you there. Looking at the contrarian side of things, I do have one underdog that I like tonight. Another guy that broke out really last year, Matt Shoemaker of the Angels. He's facing off with Hisashi Iwakuma of the Seattle Mariners. They are pitching at Safeco Field tonight, so we're talking about a run-suppressing ballpark, guy that limits walks, big strikeout rate. There is some danger because that Mariners lineup is pretty good. I mean, there is talent in that lineup, but Shoemaker's not going to beat himself. He's not going to issue free passes. Do like the upside, and because he is an underdog, you will see some people fade him. So you do have that option in GPPs to run Shoemaker out there and maybe set yourself ahead of the curve. Kind of like those who used Tyson Ross last night. Didn't get the W, but Greinke was so heavily owned, and you had Tyson Ross at a lower price tag. Those who used him saved a little bit of money, got a decent start. I'm looking at the same from Shoemaker tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, great upside when we've seen it before. He pitches deep into most games, got some strikeout upside, so I definitely like that call there. And, elsewhere, there's really not a ton of guys that inspire a lot of confidence, so that's why, obviously, we're talking GPP guys. And an interesting guy who doesn't have a lot of upside, but he's been dominant at times, is Danny Duffy. $7,400 on DraftKings. The guy with 199 WOBA allowed against lefties. Obviously not a lot of lefties in that White Sox lineup, but is Danny Duffy a guy you're considering at all? I know he doesn't have a huge upside, with his strikeout rate looking at 18.7%, just around league average there.
I'm going to pass on Duffy early in the season. I believe he has an electric arm that could generate strikeouts. He's done it before. He did sacrifice some strikeouts for control last year. Really benefited from some good luck on balls in play and fly balls. Low home run per fly ball rate. Don't like the lineup he's facing tonight, and also really scared by the weather there in Chicago. I do like another southpaw, though. I'll take the biggest betting favorite at pitcher tonight, and that's Scott Kazmir of the Oakland A's, pitching at home. We saw what Sonny Gray was able to do carving up the Rangers. Jesse Hahn had a little bit of bad luck on some balls in play last night. Duck snort from Prince Fielder really hurt him. After a very close, what looked like a third strike to the guy who had Jesse Hahn in a lot of lineups, was just a ball, according to the umpire, the man that mattered. But I like Kazmir tonight. He's opposing Russ Detweiler, so I expect him to get some run support from his offense. And low total, 7. It's at home, and Scott Kazmir, biggest betting favorite. So if you're chasing a win, Kazmir's my guy. Price tag's right on both FanDuel and DK to use him. Yeah,
and like you said, I mean, win's heavily weighted on both sites, so you're really going to need that, especially on FanDuel, where, an earned run's -2, win is 4, so really key to get yourself a win there, especially in your GPPs. We're going to go ahead and move on here to catcher, where I don't think either of us need to tell you that Buster Posey is the top option. He's first base and catcher eligible on DraftKings. Got a great matchup against Hellickson, who is just absolutely abysmal against right-handed batters. And go ahead and elaborate a little bit on Buster Posey if you'd like. If not, go ahead and throw in somebody else you want.
Well, I'll quickly mention that some people may not recognize how Jeremy Hellickson actually has a reverse platoon split. So while Posey's better against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching, he's very good against righties, and he is actually getting Hellickson's weak side of his platoon. And the fact that he's a fly ball pitcher at Chase Field, good luck navigating that lineup. It's not super daunting in the Giants, but the top third of it should produce some fantasy points. Love Posey. Love the fact that you're getting a piece of the highest total on the board tonight at 9. So yeah, Posey's the clear play at both sites for me. The one swerve move that I will make is Brian McCann on a few rosters at FanDuel. Really cheap there. Not much cheaper than Posey at DK, so I'm not going to be rolling with McCann at all there. But he's facing R.A. Dickey. If the game gets in, if weather doesn't result in a rainout, McCann against Dickey, if that knuckleball's not dancing, basically it's just a ball, and McCann can certainly put one in the seats if it's hung for him. So McCann is my GPP cheap play at FanDuel, but it's going to be mostly Posey shares for me, and it's going to be a lot of Posey shares for a lot of people tonight.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I mean, for all those reasons we highlight, he's going to be a popular play, and really no reason to fade him. There's a big difference between fading a popular play to be contrarian and then fading one just to be different. And I think that this is one of those instances where you just go ahead and get yourself a lot of Buster Posey. All right, anybody else at catcher that you're looking at here for your GPPs?
No, I mean, I may end up having to stick a couple guys in after I construct some lineups with the rest of my top plays, but in GPPs, it's going to be probably 75% Posey and then a handful of shares of McCann at FanDuel.
Yeah. All right, I agree with you there. Moving on to first base here, and a lot of power here as always. No surprise there. And I know one guy in particular you were looking at first base that's got a ton of power. So who's one of your options here first?
Well, it's going to be new Cleveland Indian Brandon Moss. Had a hot spring. He's a guy that suffered in the second half due to injury. His numbers really suffered as a result of playing with a hurt hip. And I expect him against a right-handed pitcher in Houston with the run amplifying ballpark, with the home run amplifying park factors, to have a good night against Scott Feldman. Scott Feldman is one of the worst pitchers on the board tonight. You're going to want to get a piece of him. And because it's such a lefty dominant Cleveland Indians lineup, there's a lot of stack potential with that lineup. Anybody that you can get in that order is going to have some more run production upside than maybe some guys on some other teams. So I'm all over Moss tonight.
Yeah, and I can't argue with that. I mean, if any of you played last year, MLB DFS, you know, Brandon Moss against a righty, sign yourself up, get yourself some GPP exposure, and he had some monster games last year in these situations. So definitely like that. Here's one guy that I like more on FanDuel, and obviously is another weather-permitting guy. Much better price on FanDuel, like I mentioned, than DraftKings. Joey Votto, $3,600. Garrett Cole struggles a little bit with left-handed batters, a 326 WOBA allowed. And, you know, Votto hasn't really shown the power, but was hurt last year. One of the better hitters in the game when healthy. And I just think that price tag is really, really cheap. So I like to look that way a little bit in some GPPs.
Definitely, and it can't hurt. This is the old analogy: the harder it comes in, the harder it goes out. I mean, Garrett Cole throws that premium cheddar, but if he throws a cookie up there to Joey Votto doesn't often miss. So Votto looked like a pretty good play. He has great lineup slot, good ballpark. So yeah, that price tag's right to get some Votto shares as well, assuming the weather turns for the better here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So elsewhere at first base, I know you got a couple out there guys you're looking at. So who's your next option here at first base?
Well, we got a guy that's first base eligible at both FanDuel and DK, and also catcher eligible at DK, and that's Carlos Santana. Again, I want a piece of Scott Feldman with these left-handed batters. He should be hitting third for the Indians. I'm sorry, cleanup behind Michael Brantley. So I do like Carlos Santana, the switch hitter. Actually, a little bit better against lefties than righties, but with the sheer volume of lefties that are being trotted out there against Feldman in a good ballpark with one of the higher totals on the board tonight at 8. And obviously we like Carrasco, so we know which side we expect to give up runs in that 8 total. I want some Santana. The other 2 first basemen that I have highlighted are actually Oakland A's. The first is Billy Butler, designated hitter by trade, occasional first baseman when pressed into it. Really hits left-handed pitching, had a down year last year overall, but still continued to rake against lefties. Russ Detweiler has a monstrous platoon split, struggles with right-handed batters, wasn't particularly good out of the bullpen, and yet here he is starting for the Rangers. Low total, so you might see some people scared off. Only 7. Ballpark's not great, but you're getting a really good hitter in a favorable platoon situation in a lineup that can put up some runs against a bad pitcher. And so, again, another lineup where we like the pitcher, Scott Kazmir, so we know why we like the total to stay low. I want to get some shares of Detweiler. If Detweiler exits early, we're not talking about a great bullpen, as you brought up before we hopped on the podcast as well. So I do want some Billy Butler. The sneaky name here is Mark Canha. Never taken a big league at-bat, was actually with the Marlins in their AAA affiliate last year. Big spring, which doesn't mean a hell of a lot to me other than the fact that he got on the roster. But he's going to be the platoon partner, at least in the early going, with Ike Davis. And we know what those platoons have resulted in for DFS gamers in recent years in Oakland. Canha might be that next shooter on that list. I expect him to hit as high as 5th in the order like Ike Davis did. He is very cheap on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Only first base eligible on FanDuel, first base and outfield eligible on DraftKings. I want some shares of Canha. Going to give you some roster flexibility and some cap relief.
Yeah, I really like that. And that was the guy I kind of alluded to earlier that you had mentioned that wasn't on my radar at all. And really like that. And you know with absolute certainty, especially on a 13-game slate, he will not be high owned. So You slot him into your roster, he goes yard, you're going to be at a huge, huge advantage at everyone else in some big tournaments. So love that call there. Moving on to second base here, and I know there's one guy in particular that you had mentioned before the show, and this is a guy, another with weather concerns, but in a good spot, and that's Neil Walker going up against Mike Leake, who's got the splits, really very good against righties, struggling against lefties, 352 WOBA allowed last year, and Neil Walker in a good spot here. You can play him at second base, third base, should be batting right in the heart of that order too for Pittsburgh.
Yep, we got a cleanup hitter who is a switch hitter, but he's much, much better against right-handed pitching than left-handed pitching. One of the best hitters at the keystone position when facing a right-handed pitcher. Actually like him a little bit more at DK, where you can use him at third base, but he's definitely in play at both sites if you want to use him at second base. Like I said, cleanup hitter, can take advantage of Mike Leake's platoon split. It's his favorable side of the platoon as well, and you've got the home run amplifying ways of Great American Ballpark in your favor as well. So Walker's definitely a guy that I like, if weather permitting, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And elsewhere at second base, there's another guy that you had mentioned that's nice and cheap, and you think that he's going to be bumping up in the batting order today. So who's that?
That's a guy named Marcus Semien of the Oakland Athletics. More Oakland love. He's second base and third base eligible at DraftKings, and he's shortstop eligible at FanDuel, where I am absolutely in love. He's going to be on a lot of my rosters. He's under $3,000 at FanDuel. Plop him in at shortstop. He hit 8th for the A's last night against a righty, but he really, even though his transition from producing at a high level, at the AAA level, hasn't really translated in a lot of big league success. He's actually been an above-average hitter already against left-handed pitching. We know he can hit lefties. He gets one that's bad against right-handed batters. If Semien moves up into the top 5 in the order, which I expect him to, I actually think he'll hit second tonight. That's my gut feeling, judging by what they've trotted out, the lefties they played in the 1-2 spots in the first 2 games against righties. I think Semien slots second tonight. I love him. I will be using him across both sites, probably flip him around second and third base at DK, depending on how I want to juggle those rosters. But I'm going to get a lot of shares of him at shortstop at FanDuel for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we'll get to here in a few minutes, shortstop not exactly a deep position today, so take advantage of that while you can. Anybody else that you're a big fan of here at second base?
More Oakland A's love. Ben Zobrist, for those that felt burned by him last night, I was in that camp, an 0 for 4 against Colby Lewis and the bullpen. I'm hopping right back on him again tonight. As I stated, I like pieces of that A's lineup. It's going to be a sneaky stack tonight because it's a low total, just 7. Not a great ballpark, but if you hook the right guys against Ross Detweiler, I do think there's some potential for more run production than the low total might indicate. But again, remember, Scott Kazmir, biggest betting favorite tonight, and he's a part of this game. So that's a big part of that total being as low as it is. So I want to get some A's. Zobrist is one. Another Bay Area second baseman that I like is Joe Panik, hitting second for the Giants. Get a piece of the highest total of the night, which is 9. Get a cheap piece of it in Panik from a good lineup slot. Against Hellickson, fly ball pitcher. Panik doesn't have a lot of power, so I don't necessarily expect him to put one in the seats, but Hellickson not exactly the type of pitcher that you're looking to fade. You want to get a piece of that action, piece of that high total, and if you can get it for cheap with a good lineup slot like Panik plays a position that really isn't deep on offensive talent too. So Panik's a guy that I really like.
Yeah, and he's really, really cheap on FanDuel as well. I believe he's $2,300. So absolutely love that. And moving over to the hot corner here, third base. Some good options, and one guy I'm going to put out here for you. I know you like Kazmir. I'm a fan of Kazmir as well, but Adrian Beltre mashes left-handed pitching. So is Adrian Beltre a guy you're looking at in tournaments as well?
He is. On rosters where I'm obviously not going to use Kazmir, or maybe I pair my Carrasco and Shoemaker, definitely getting a piece of Beltre makes sense. He really does hammer left-handed pitching, hits in a great lineup slot, and it's a game that you have to figure with the low total isn't going to be heavily targeted, so you might get some low ownership benefits of using Beltre as well. So he's definitely a guy that should be on people's radars. Not going to be as highly owned as some of the other guys that I like at the position, but he's definitely, if you're going to go premier third baseman, he seems to be the guy to go to tonight. The price points and matchups just don't line up with some of these other guys.
Yeah, I agree with you there. A lot of the top options not as enticing as you'd like, and here's a guy, I'm going to throw him in here. I'm playing him in some cash games due to the matchup as well. And I don't want to give up on it. I'm certainly not going to give up after just 2 weak games. But Kyle Seager, home against a righty, locked into my lineups every single time.
Yep, and I mean, I mentioned that Shoemaker's an underdog. He's my contrarian pick at pitcher in tournaments, but in cash games and in GPPs, Seager looks pretty good if you're not using Shoemaker, hitting fifth behind a talented and deep Mariners lineup. You got Cano and Nelson Cruz hitting directly in front of him. Definitely some run production upside there. You got a bopper a couple spots behind him in Zunino. If Zunino turns on one and Kyle Seager's that duck on the pond, you're going to get a run scored from him. So I do like Seager. Price point's right. He's basically the only other premier third base option that I would look at tonight other than Beltray.
All right. Yeah, I'm completely on board with you there. Who else do you like at third base? It's a cheaper option. Anybody that is a value that you like?
Two names. Again, it comes down to weather, but Pedro Alvarez, third base eligible still at DK. Only first base eligible at FanDuel. Price is okay there. Not sure I'm going to be using a lot of him at FanDuel. Where I can stick him at third base on DK, I like him a little bit. Great American Ballpark. Great for home run power. Pedro Alvarez has light tower power, and we know Mike Leake struggles with left-handed batters. So Pedro Alvarez, a guy that I'm looking at. Another guy that should be owned fairly heavily because he's gotten off to a good start. Really good pinch hit performance in his first game. Big game in game two. Guy that a lot of people well, anybody that used him loved yesterday. Not high ownership, but Jake Lamb, I expect that ownership to go up. Hit a 3-run dinger last night. Price point is still super low at FanDuel. Rose a little bit at DK, but still good price point if you want a piece of Chris Heston, which you should, and if you want a piece of that 9 total, man, 9. I want action, and I want Jake Lamb.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I wanted pieces of that action last night. Paid off for me, and I'm going right back to the well on this one again tonight. Stacking, adding Jake Lamb in my stack, keeping him in there, and he's got great upside. I love that right there. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for third base here. Next up, shortstop, where if you go ahead and look at the top of the list, you're going to recognize a familiar name. We don't need to tell you. Troy Tulowitzki always in play against any pitcher in any situation, but pretty expensive tonight, sitting at $5,100 on DraftKings. His FanDuel price, which was cheaper, it's been slowly creeping up. It was $4,400 yesterday, back up to $4,600 now. You know, he makes for a more affordable play there on FanDuel a little bit, but we don't need to tell you about Troy Tulowitzki now that I talked about him for 2 minutes. So the other guys with some big upside, you've got obviously Hanley Ramirez coming off his double dong the first game and going against Aaron Harang, who we know not exactly striking fear in the heart of Hanley Ramirez or anyone else in the entire world. But Ramirez, you could play him at shortstop or in the outfield at DraftKings. Obviously, just outfield eligibility on FanDuel. So who else are you looking at here?
I want another piece of that Arizona Diamondbacks, San Francisco Giants, total of 9. I'll take Chris Owings against Chris Heston. Heston is not the type of pitcher that you should be scared of. Decent upper minor success, but he's a crafty righty, and crafty righty means pummelable. We'll make that a word today.
Pummelable,
so,
I like it.
So I like Chris Owings tonight. Good price point. I'd expect him back in the lineup tonight. He is the starting second baseman for the Diamondbacks, despite manager Chip Hale's insistence on juggling everyone in and out of the lineup through 2 games. I do like Owings. Probably going to hit low in the order for them tonight, so isn't going to get a great lineup slot, but should be hitting around our boy Jake Lamb. So there is some potential to hook those guys together, get some cheap action in that, and I do like Owings. And then I'll beat the drum for Simeon one more time. If you can get him in at shortstop at FanDuel under $3,000, I love it.
So that was Simeon, right?
Yep.
All right, we'll go. I just had to reiterate one more time. Simeon, I'm a big fan of his tonight now, like you mentioned, and I like that call, especially FanDuel, where you can get him in at shortstop. So we're going to go ahead and move on here to the outfield, where there's obviously a lot of options, as there always are. Got Carlos Gomez in a good spot here against Eddie Butler, who didn't pitch a lot of innings last year, but really struggled when he was up. Been kind of a bust as a prospect so far with his time in the majors. Carlos Gomez is a guy that can do it all. He's got power. He's got speed. Hits at the top of the order. Looks like Ryan Braun may sit today once again. So one less bat behind him, but there's still plenty of guys that can bring him in as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the absence of or possible absence of Braun would also open the door to Gerardo Parra again. Down order option if you do want some cheap exposure to to Miller Park and its run amplifying ways. Not a guy that I love, but a guy that is okay to round out lineups with if you find yourself looking for some savings somewhere. But obviously monitor Braun's status for tonight. His MRI did come back. That there was no structural damage or anything, but he is dealing with rib soreness. So I would expect him to be out again tonight, but do double check just in case he's feeling limber and going tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, that's rarely is there a situation where we need to monitor, but a guy like Braun, important, especially opening up Parra for value if he sits out. So check that out. And I'll highlight another guy here. He's my favorite player at any position tonight. Corey Dickerson, best hitter in the game last year against right-handed pitching. And Willie Peralta, whatever you'd like to call him, was one of the worst against left-handed batters at 361 wall out. So Corey Dickerson, $4,800 on DraftKings. He's still just sitting at $4,300 on FanDuel. Nice discount price there. And I'm sorry, $4,200 even. I absolutely love Corey Dickerson tonight.
Gotta like the power. Gotta like the fact that he's going to get that left-handed homer boost at Miller Park, and the fact that he's on the weak side of Willie Peralta's platoon split. So even though he did have some road woes last year, keep in mind this isn't your average road ballpark. If there's a ballpark that plays pretty similarly to Coors Field in terms of park factors, it's Miller Park. Amplifies runs, amplifies home runs. Not to the same extent as Coors, but when you're going to get these Rockies on the road, this is a good ballpark to get them on the road in.
Yeah, absolutely. As we saw in the first few games, I mean, they're already having some success. Dickerson's got those big bats ahead of him and should have plenty of RBI opportunities. So elsewhere in the outfield, go ahead and give me some guys that you're looking at here.
I want more of the Cleveland Indians, and that means their number 3 hitter. That means Michael Brantley. I'm not buying that his power is going to be exactly what it was last year, but he's at the right age for that power outburst that he showcased. He makes a ton of contact, so oddly, you get a nice high ceiling paired with a fairly high floor. You don't usually get that. Surrounded by lefties, they should give Scott Feldman some trouble. Good ballpark in Houston. Minute Maid Park is good for amplifying runs and homers. So I like Brantley. Also capable of stealing a base if he gets on as well. Stole more than 20 last year. So I really like Brantley tonight. I am going to hook some Indians together, and that's going to include their number 3 hitter, Michael Brantley. And then it's more of the Diamondbacks and Giants for me. I'll rattle off 3 names real quick. We can get your take on them as well. Angel Pagan, the 3 hitter for the Giants. AJ Pollock, who got the surprising night off last night, should be returned to that leadoff spot. Again, facing Chris Heston. I want to get some action of Heston. And David Peralta, a guy that hit cleanup last night, delivered last night, and I expect more of the same tonight.
Yeah. David Peralta, as you know, working with me last year, one of my favorite cheap guys to target. I'm going to continue that until it looks like if he keeps this up. Obviously, in the season, price won't be cheap for long, so I'm taking advantage, especially in this situation tonight. And Angel Pagan, I mean, we already mentioned the great matchup, reverse splits, and he's in a great spot as well. And he's been off to a great start. We don't necessarily anticipate he's going to continue where he's at because hasn't been a great hitter. He's been a good hitter, but never a great hitter throughout his career. So all 3 of those guys on my radar as well. And
Good point on the reverse split with Pagan. That's something that definitely needs to be brought up. We mentioned that Hellickson is actually worse against right-handed batters than left-handed batters. Pagan is the rare right-handed batter that's better against right-handed pitching than left-handed pitching. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, plus the ballpark factor, plus hitting 3. I mean, there's a ton to like here, and the price point is great at both DK and FanDuel.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw 2 other names at you here real quick. Get your take. Mr. Forearms himself, Popeye, Bryce Harper. Obviously not a great matchup against Jacob deGrom, who pitched really well last year. But as we know, Harper, an insane amount of power. So I believe that he's in play. But for me in tournaments, he's not going to be a guy I'm going to be targeting heavily, only because he probably will be pretty heavily owned tonight.
See, I agree with the stance of getting some shares of Harper. Not sure he'll be heavily owned. I think DeGrom, has a bit of respect, at least from the DFS community. They realize that the reigning National League Rookie of the Year was very good last year. The injured Nationals lineup could also sway some people away from Harper, but you did hit the nail on the head with the power, and I like Harper just for that reason, just for a few shares because you can never have too much power in your GPP lineups, and Bryce Harper is certainly the man that possesses quite a bit of it.
Absolutely. And speaking about power, I'm glad you brought that up. My last guy has a ton of it, Mark Trumbo. You can play him at first base or outfield. He had a good first game. I mean, he was part of all the festivities yesterday, and coming back in once again. He's a big strikeout guy, so a risky guy, especially on FanDuel where you get negatives for outs. But like we're talking GPPs here, so obviously you're going to have low floor a lot of times, high ceiling, and he's got just as much power as pretty much anyone here in that, especially in that lineup.
And he gets a good matchup with Chris Heston. Heston's a guy that's really a non-prospect. As I said, put up decent upper minor league numbers, but is a guy who is a crafty righty. He barely breaks 90 miles per hour when he's throwing hard. He's a sub 90 mile per hour guy, and that you don't have a lot of room for error with that type of velocity, and you especially don't have much room for error against a guy like Trumbo who has top shelf power. If he misses, expect Trumbo to send the ball a long way at Chase Field tonight. Definitely another good piece of that total of 9. I'm going to keep repeating it over and over again. You see a total of 9 on the board when 8's the next highest total, and you got a bunch of 7s and 7.5 sprinkled in there. You have to attack it aggressively because, and this is a point that you'll hear me make all year in articles on the podcast. Those beautiful casinos weren't built in Vegas because they made crappy lines. They know what they're doing, and when you see a total of 9, you need to be jumping on it.
Yeah, we saw 8.5 in this game last night, and there was 13 runs scored. So just to further that point, I will have a ton of exposure to it once again. And with that, we are all wrapped up for the podcast today. We appreciate you guys spending your time with us here. And check out a lot of great content we have at dailyfantasycafe.com. I'm at BigGively42. He is at BChad50. And we will see you guys on the next podcast.